Hi, I have a question for you. I have wondered if any of you struggle with the same thing that I struggle with, and that is who's in control of your life, you or your circumstances? Let's talk about that for a little bit. What or who is in control? So, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to start off with. And the first one is, what can you control? There are things you can control, aren't there? I mean, you can control your responses. You can control how your hair looks in the morning. You can control what time you go to bed. You can control what you put in your mouth. There are things you can control. But are there things you can't control? Well, right now I am looking outside at a very dreary day, and it is not my preferred type of day. It's rainy. It's supposed to rain all day. I can't control that. There just are things outside of the grasp of our control. So, what I want you to do right now is I want you to get out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and I want you to draw a big circle. Then, inside that circle, I want you to draw another circle. Okay? Can you picture that? Big circle on the outside, a small circle on the inside. All right, now on that outer ring, I want you to write down, think of a situation that you're dealing with right now, and write down all of the things that you just cannot control about that particular situation, the circumstances that you have no direct input on. Okay? Now, I'm not going to wait for you to do that, so you can go back and you can listen to this again if you would like, and you can go through this exercise. But then on that inner circle, what you're going to do is you're going to write down all of those things that you can control about this particular situation or this particular circumstance. Okay? Now, as you're thinking about the way this is going to look, I would challenge you, or I would suggest that most of us spend the majority of our time in that outer circle. We spend a lot of energy, a lot of emotional just input into those things that we can't control. And it drains us. It drains us of our energy. It drains us of our creativity. But that's where we spend most of our time. So I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of a flip-flop there. And rather than looking at that big outer circle, I'm going to ask you to focus a little bit more on that inner circle, on those things in the circumstances in which you do have control. Okay? So that's step number one about who's in control, circumstances or you. Start doing a paradigm shift about that. Now, another thing with regard to circumstances and you is that I think that we spend a lot of time in the world of excuse land. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I do hear it a lot. There's a lot of excuses. And I have heard, and I have used it myself, I agree, that, well, my childhood situation dictates that I am the way I am. My parents, my genes, my environment, these things are all why I am the way I am. Now, while I would agree with you in one sense, I don't agree completely that that dictates what we say and do. It is merely an influencing factor in our lives. They can't make you do anything. You choose to respond in light of those influences in which you find yourself or you've been raised. With that in mind, another thing that we tend to do is we tend to react very, very quickly. Sometimes we need to think about this button, right in the middle of our forehead, and we just need to push the pause button. Just push it. So when you are in a situation where you want to react, push the pause button. Think about it a minute. Another paradigm shift. Let's think about being proactive in our responses as opposed to reactive. Push the pause button. Reactive language might be something like, it's really tough, but I'll try to do that. But I know I'm not really given in this particular area. I'll try. But proactive language will say, well, I know this is a situation, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So push the pause button, give yourself a few breaths, and just launch into it. Do it or don't do it, whatever the case may be. Another thing about circumstances versus you is this idea of what you lack versus what you have. And I know this has been a particular challenge for me over the course of my life. And I have 61 years next week of operating in this lack land. And that is where we want to start shifting away from. Don't focus on what you lack, focus on what you have, okay? So just think about, again, what you can do, what you can't control, what you have versus what you lack. I want to give you an illustration too that I found especially amusing. One time I heard a person talk about this. And it is with regard to those people or those obstacles in your life, those things that you think you're lacking because you didn't have this or you did have them in your life. And you get angry at them or you get angry at the situation that you have no control over. So in this case, let's just talk about a person. It makes about as much sense to get angry at a person for being who they are as it makes sense to get mad at a chair for being a chair. You can't control a chair being a chair. You can't control that other person. Let's face it, we have a hard enough time controlling ourselves. But stop thinking within that mindset of lack and think about what you have, think about what you can do, not what you can't do. Okay, so now we've talked about some of those things. What's the plan? Let's talk a little bit about the plan. You have a toolkit. I have a toolkit. We all have a toolkit. And in our toolkit, we have certain components, and one of them is self-awareness. You got to start there. You need to be very aware of what is that talk you have listened to and is playing over and over and over in your mind. What are those self-limiting beliefs that you have tapped into? Well, I just can't do this. Well, I'm just this way. Why don't you change that verbiage from, oh, I'm just this way, or I just can't do this, and tag on a line at the end, which is up until now, okay? And you need to also be aware that you have blind spots. We all have blind spots. So when you're thinking about your circumstances, maybe versus you, maybe you're operating in a blind spot area. Seek out someone that can help identify those blind spots. We all have them. Another thing too, be very aware with this tool of self-awareness that you have vulnerable points. You have some weak spots. Be aware of those so that you have a strategic plan to push through those vulnerable points. You might ask yourself also, where is pride creeping in? Where is the pride creeping in that is keeping me in this bondage to my circumstances? Or what are the fears? There's all kinds of things. But as you become aware of who you are and what moves you, when and how, then you can go forward and you can start taking control of those things you can take control of, okay? The other tool that you have in your toolkit is creativity. We all have creativity. Look for possibilities and solutions. I know that for me, I started this positive affirmation. And so each morning when I'm doing my stretches and each night when I'm doing my stretches before I go to sleep, I will say to myself, I see possibilities, I find solutions. I see possibilities, I find solutions. Does that mean in every case those possibilities magically appear and those solutions are there? No, that isn't what it means. But I have done a paradigm shift in my thinking so that I am in a better environment for those possibilities and my creativity to kick in. Make sense? Hope so. Okay, moving on to the next one. You have personal resolve. I like to call it tenacity because it is another one of my positive affirmations. I will also say, I am resilient. I am tenacious. And so when the rug is pulled out from underneath me, well, then I know I can be tenacious. I can be resilient. I have personal resolve. I can pick myself back up. I have control over my responses. I don't need to let those circumstances continually suppress me in my forward momentum. And then the last one you have in your toolkit, the tool is that of inner voice or intuition. You have a gut sense. There is a gut sense. I'm not going to spend any time talking about it right now, but there have been scientific studies that say physiologically there is a correlation and a connection between that gut sense you have right here and your brain. There is a physiological correlation. Check it out sometime. Listen to that gut sense. Listen to that inner voice and tune into your intuition. That was easy for me to say, wasn't it? So I'm just going to bottom line this. I've taken enough time right now for you to think through some things. You got a lot of things to take in and absorb and work on. So bottom line is, I want you to rise above your circumstances. Did you hear me? Let me repeat it one more time. Rise above your circumstances. Till next time, enjoy.